of you to another video in the Nectar in a Sieve novel series. So let us start with chapter 16. Dies the reaping, said, and the threshing and winnowing. How shall we manage when the time comes? When the time comes, Nathan said with a gleam in his eye, the strength will be forthcoming. Never fear. I looked at him doubtfully, thin and drawn, with thighs and arms so puny that no muscle showed even when he flexed them. The rice would have to be lifted plant by plant, and the grain separated from the husk and the husk beaten for the last few grains. It meant working long hours in the flooded fields with bent back and much laboring thereafter converting the paddy into rice. It was no task for the weakened bodies. "You'll see," he said with confidence. "We'll find our strength. One look at the swelling grain will be enough to renew our vigor." So it shows the pathetic plight of them. And in the previous place, it describes the process required to, you know, convert the grains to paddy. Indeed, it did our hearts good to see the paddy ripen. We watched it as a dog watches over a bone, jealously lest it be snatched away, or as a mother her child with pride and affection, and most of all with fear. As we sat there, Irrawaddy came to us, stepping softly. "It is hot within," she said forlornly. "I could not rest." She went and picked a head of paddy before sitting down beside us. I saw her fingers parting the husk, feeling for the grain within. How much longer? The same question, the answer to which she knew who had lived on the land since birth. 3 weeks, Nathan's reply, grave, sincere, absolutely honest, where another might have repeated, tempted to easier words. "It is not long to wait," I said, trying to hearten her, "and if the gods are kind, it may even be sooner." That was what we prayed for. That is, might not be too late. The tears that brightened Ida's eyes, the silences of my husband, the twitching face of Selim, all came from one thing, the thought imprisoned in the brain, but incapable of utterance. That Kuti might not live to see the harvesting. The rest of us might struggle on. Our endurance was greater, but he was only a child, not yet 5, but already waited a long time and who had suffered more than any of us. Whether from the unsuitable food or from the constant, restless movement of his body, he had developed a thick, irritating rash, which he kept scratching, and where his nails caught sores and blisters began, destroying whatever little peace he have had. Sometimes, after mourning for hours at a stretch, he would fall into an exhausted daze. It could not be called sleep, it was nothing so sweet, and I would go to him with beating heart to see if the fight was ended. But and again he struggled back into conscious, took up again his tormented living. Almost I wished it otherwise. So we see here how Kuti suffers from hunger and how he struggles to live. Actually, later Kuti would die, and we would see it in this chapter how he died. Some 2 or 3 days later, I noticed a change in Kuti. His eyes lost their dullness and whimpering that had been so harrowing to listen, and stopped. I thought it was the end, a brief rallying, a frothing up of the last reserves of strength, when there is no longer any need to hold back, like the sudden brilliant glow of expiring taper. Since we gave him nothing, there had been nothing to give that might account for the change. The following day, however, the improvement continued, and the night he slept peacefully. I gazed at the small, tired face, soothed by sleep as it had not been for many nights, and even as I puzzled about the change, profound gratitude flooded through me, and it seemed to me that the gods were not remote, not unheedful, since they had heard his cries and stilled them as it were by a miracle. Ira crept up to me as I watched and smiled at me and the child, and I whispered, "He is better," but there was no need, as she, of all people, knew. So, in fact, Ira had gone into prostitution and earned the money to feed Kuti so he could live. But eventually it fails as Kuti dies. Through relief and exhaustion, I slept well that night, woken refreshed before daybreak with a renewed hopefulness. Soon all will be well, I thought. We shall eat, and the strength will come back to us, and there will be no more fear. This had been a bad time, but it is passing, as all things must, and now it is not joy which passes in a trice, but sorrow which is slower in the going, and so one must be patient. A few more days, wait in a few more days, anxiety. It is not beyond enduring. It is not too much to ask. This I thought as I lay there listening to the sounds of sleep and lost in my own imaginings. The darkness was lifting when I heard the sound of footsteps, very soft, less heard than felt, as a slight tremor of the ground. If it had been a reverberating gong, the sound could not have had more violent effect. My fancies fled headlong from me. In their place, a cloud of black and grey arose, revolving before my eyes and assuming fantastic shapes and forms, until at last one stood out clearly away from the swirling mist and with a face to it, Kunti. No but Kunti, coming stealthily uh, by night to thieve from us what little we had, unashamed as she was and always had been. So we come to hear the tangible reality when Kuti so change eyes changed their color. We come to the tangible reality, the manner in which the writer deals with hunger, starvation, and struggle for survival. She believes God was listening and gave the child strength despite the lack of food. So they are very, they believe in mystical things. So, sh out of all people she knew the most means everyone knew that Kuti would somehow die. Rukmani remembered Kunti's blackmail and assumed it was her again. She was suffering because she took the grain from them. The footsteps were coming nearer. I raised myself on my elbow, the better to listen, trying to still the thudding in my eardrums, which impeded my hearing. Nearer and nearer, I stood up, bracing myself for the encounter, and stepped from the familiar darkness of the hut into the grey night outside. The figure was there, soft and blurred in outline, but a woman's. I threw myself at it, pinning the arm savagely, thrust at it, and beat it to the ground. Fell on it with a fury, felt the weak struggles of the body beneath mine, like the feeble fluttering of a trapped bird, and exulted. The air is full of harsh sounds, but whether they issued from my throat or hers, or existed only in my imagination, I do not know. Me, the being that was me was no longer in possession. It had been consumed in flames of anger and hatred that raged through me in those few minutes. What took its place, I do not know. Then I heard a thin, shrill scream, "Mother, mother!" Hands were dragging me away. Uh, Hands were dragging we away. I felt myself pulled and thrown to one side. Find, mad woman. So find is devil, mad woman. Nathan was shrieking. Aka's mother. He was bending over the form, doing something to it. I saw he was quite naked and wondered at it, forgetting he had come straight from sleep. He turned to me. Are you out of your mind? Your own daughter. You have killed her, murderess. He and Selma carried her in, and I slunk after them, disbelieving. It could not be Irrawaddy. It was some monstrous mistake they had made, not I. I crept to her side and saw it was Irrawaddy. Her face was puffed and bore horrible marks. One lip was bleeding where the tooth had bitten down. I closed my eyes. Red circles opened out before them, receding into endless blackness. I shook myself clear of them and went to aid my husband. She had a pot of water beside him and was wiping the blood from her body. Her sari was stained with blood. I took the cloth from him. So very horrid imagery is given here, imagery of blood and so on. He thrust, I will say to her. He thrust me aside. Get away. You have done enough harm. You are not fit. I thought it was Kunti, I whispered. He moved a little, making room for me, but remained near, not wholly trusting. She had been badly cut. A long, jagged gash showed in her left side. There was a similar one on her left wrist. These wounds, I said, I did not make them. I did not expect him to believe me. I know the bangles broke. Bangles? How could she have bangles who had not a pie of her own? I stared at him, not knowing amid these unreal happenings whether those were his words or only what I heard. He pointed. Do you not see the glass there and there? She was wearing bangles. They had broken against her body, which had protected me from injury. I began to swab. The cuts were full of glass, some of it in splinters, some of it in powder, like shining sand. When I cleaned them, I found the two largest gashes. So we can hear Ira has nothing to eat or wear. So how can she have bangers? Probably she had gone on prostitution. For the rest, there was nothing I could use, but these were small and mercifully soon stopped bleeding. And the sari I had taken from her was soaked with blood and grimy where dust clung to the wet cloth. I took it down the river intending to wash it, shook it clear of dust and broken glass. As I did so, something dropped from the folds, fell into the muddy water, sank, was lost. But not before I had seen that it was a rupee. I went on with my work, scrubbing the blood stains, rinsing the cloth, laying it on the grass to dry. Then I came back and swept and cleaned the hut, cleared the courtyard, removed all signs of the struggle that had been. The sun was moving to midday by the time I had finished. Now that there was nothing more to do, the thoughts I had so far avoided came crowding in on me to an agitated turmoil. Who had given her the money? Why had she stolen it? And if so, how and who from? Why did she have to walk by night and wearing glass bangles? I kept very still, not to waken my sleeping daughter, while the thoughts went galloping through my head, and question after question unanswered. Putty lying in the corner of the hut began to moan. Ida heard and opened her eyes, gesturing vaguely towards him. I went to her first. Lie still, hut will open again. She looked at me somberly. So, looking at her somberly means like very strangely. Feed him, he is hungry. Take the rupee, you will find in Masari. I knew then that it was she who had been responsible for the improvement in Kuti, not I, not my prayers. Nathan and was about to say something to question her, perhaps. I gripped his arm, forcing him to silence. Ira was struggling to rise. I went to her. Lie still, I said, again laying restraining hands on her. I will see to him. I picked up the mourning child and took him outside, trying to quieten him. It was useless. Ira had fed him and freed him from hunger. The taste was with him still, and he would not be quietened. I walked away from the hut with him in my arms, and at length his sharp cries sank into soft whimpering and finally into silence. So here we can see the struggles of Ida, the basic feelings of humanity, how Ida empathized with Kuti's starvation and pain, develops maternal feeling to Kuti, had to lower herself to prostitution to feed Kuti. Protective, caring, affectionate, and compassionate was Ira. So, with the next part, we will meet with part 2 of chapter 15 in the next video. So, chapter 16 in the next video. So, do stay tuned in for the next video. So subscribe my channel, like my video, and click the bell icon for part 2 of chapter 16. Thank you.